So, hi everyone. I'm Nina Collins from Revel. Oh, I should change my name on the little pin thing and say that I'm Nina Collins. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at Revel. And I also am the moderator of a group called Moms of Adult Children. And I run a support group every other Thursday for moms of adult children, which I started in January because I came back from a trip with my 4 kids in their 20s and one of their girlfriends. I took them to Egypt over Christmas, which was a very expensive trip. And I was miserable on the trip. I was so anxious, and I mean, it wasn't miserable. It was Egypt. It was beautiful, but I was very anxious and felt not really liked and kind of like I was trying too hard. And I came home and I thought, okay, this year in 2020, I'm going to pull back a little bit emotionally from my children just right now. Just we're in a phase where I'm feeling too involved. And so I kind of made it my mission, which is why I started this group. And I've just been trying to do a lot of thinking about my interaction with my adult kids. And then I discovered this book like a month ago called Walking on Eggshells, Navigating the Delicate Relationship Between Adult Children and Parents by Jane Isay. And Jane is a name I've always known. I grew up in book publishing starting in the 90s when I graduated from college. She has a long history in book publishing. She was the editor-in-chief of Harcourt Brace. She's written many books. She's a legend in book publishing. So I'd always known her name. And I picked up the book and couldn't believe how great it was. Like, it literally I described to people as like a little bit like my Bible. Like the number one piece of advice was basically stop giving advice and back off. But we're going to ask Jane lots of questions. But I really found it so helpful. And I thought I'm just going to reach out and invite her to come do an event with us and talk to us about her wisdom. So we spoke a couple of weeks ago for the first time. Jane is 83, right, Jane?
I'll be 83 next month. Yeah.
Amazing. Has a really good idea for a next book, which I won't share unless she wants to share it. But she's done a ton of writing. When did you write this book? How old were you?
What happened was my grown kids were in their 20s and I was miserable. They weren't returning my phone calls. You know, they were pulling away. And as I was editor-in-chief at Harcourt, I tried to get some of my psychology authors, including Mary Pfeiffer, whom I had discovered, to write this book. Mm-hmm. Nobody was in that spot, but my friends, my lunch friends at the Union Square Cafe, the agents and editors at my generation were all having the same problem. And we'd get up, we'd hug, and often they would say, I thought I was the only person who had this problem. Now, we in publishing know that if everybody has the problem and they think they're the only person, there's a book.
There's a book.
And as the year went on, I got sicker and sicker of corporate life. Mm-hmm. I consider corporations to be the tools of the devil. And I thought, well, what if I write this book?
Wait, was this the first book you've written?
Yeah, it was my first book.
Really? Wow.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. And our head of publicity was a friend of mine who's a novelist named Jennifer Gilmore. I went to Jennifer and I said, I think I'm going to call it Walking on Eggs. She said, Jane, the expression is walking on eggshells. Thank you, Jennifer Gilmore. And then I quit my job and I started interviewing people for the proposal. You know, you have to do a proposal. Meanwhile, my late husband was a literary agent and we talked about who to send it to. And we decided to send it to the smartest person in publishing, I thought at the time, who had also fired me.
And wait, you have to tell me who was the late husband and who
Jonathan Dolger. And Phyllis Graham was my first editor. So now, here's the week. It's late July. And I get a call from my son saying that his wife, she worked for ABC, her waters broke at the Democratic convention and she was in the hospital. And they didn't know what was going to happen with the baby, five weeks premature. Baby was born in New York Monday. Tuesday, Jonathan submitted the proposal to Phyllis. And Wednesday morning, she called and made an offer, which he accepted. He was so surprised that it was so quick that he said yes. It was a good offer. exactly the amount of money I would have paid for somebody who'd never written a book.
That's great, Jane. Well, yeah, and of course you were,
Crazy.
but wait, now I'm trying to guess. This was in like 2005 or so?
Yeah, it's 18 years. It's 18 years ago.
And what did they pay? Like
They paid
$75,000?
$5,000.
That would have been my guess. So for all of you, I used to be a literary agent as well, so I know
Yeah.
the business.
And for world rights,
for world rights, and it's still in print.
still, it's the best selling of my 4 books. And Phyllis's assistant is now an executive editor, Karen Marcus.
Yeah.
And Karen and I have stayed friends, and Phyllis and I, we've all stayed friends. In the book business, it doesn't matter if you've been fired or fired somebody. If you like each other, you get back together, and you better be damn sure not to be horrible to anybody, because someday they'll be your boss.
It comes back around, right? Okay, so you were in your 20s, you were sick of book publishing, you have 2 sons, right?
I was
So
in
your
my
kids you were in your 50s, I guess, probably like
60s.
60s. Okay, so your sons were in their 20s.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, I think the first question I want to ask you is about boundaries in general. Did you feel like when you were raising kids, you had good boundaries? Were boundaries something that came up for you as an issue later? Like, how do you feel about boundaries as a parent?
Well, when I was raising them, I was in charge.
Mm-hmm.
We lived in New Haven. They grew up in New Haven, and my first husband was a psychoanalyst, a Freudian, which is of no use when it comes to child rearing. I really raised them, and I told them what they had to do, and I was loving, and I was really, all the best I could be. And I tried not to get in their heads.
Mm-hmm.
I had this image, I think it's from Mary Poppins, where the mother would get in the children's heads when they were dreaming,
Mm-hmm.
and rearrange their dreams. I thought that was a bad idea. But the boundary issue really didn't come up until they were grown.
Until they were grown. And then in what way did it come up when they were grown? Like, I guess I'm curious. I mean, in this book, it's very clear you talk about and struggle with all the things that all of us talk about. This feeling of sometimes not liking your kids, a feeling that they don't like you, a feeling that they're not returning your calls, they're pulling away, they're not giving you any information. So I'm wondering if it's so universal. When kids are little, it feels so easy to raise them. It's like you said, you were in charge, you tell them what to do. But
That's
then
right.
invariably stuff goes wrong. They're complicated, we're complicated, they're angry at us. In your particular case, like, what do you feel you had done wrong?
I had enough therapy in my life to answer that by saying I did the best I could.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my sons are in their 50s. David is 56, founder of StoryCorps. Josh is 52, founder of an important consulting and PR firm. They call me and say, Mom, why did you send me to camp?
Mm-hmm. So there's still
camp would be good.
Right.
Mom, why didn't you give me lessons? Well, you were going to a Jewish day school and you were learning Hebrew and English, and you came home tired. I figured you could stay home.
So I guess what I'm taking away from that is they're going to have wounds, and they're going to be mad at
They're going to have wounds. And the positive is that they talk to you.
Right. So how do
Because
you?
The distance is their great weapon.
Distance is their great weapon. Right. So what you really want to do is try and figure out when they're in their 20s, how to maintain a relationship, how to have the best relationship possible where you have your sanity, they feel like they have their freedom and they're respected.
They do.
And you have to just accept that there's always going to be stuff that they're blaming you for, period.
Absolutely. And in my experience, they blame the mom.
Of course, much more than
because
they blame.
We're the stable one. That we're the, I used to think, what am I, the wallpaper? Yes. Right. I sit on the wall and I don't bother anybody, and I'm always there. So actually, there are two important things that I found out, many important things. The first, my great discovery for Walking on Eggshells, when I interviewed I interviewed half grown children from 25 to 55 and half parents of grown children from 55 to 85. So I was looking for the communication, and every one of the grown children I interviewed started saying, I love my parents. Mm. I'm grateful to my parents. I'm grateful. Some said, I'm grateful for the gift of life. Some of them said, I'm grateful for their sacrifices. And some of them with children said, I had no idea how hard it was to raise children.
Mhm.
And then I say, and how are you getting along? And often they would say, we're not speaking.
I'm grateful to my parents. I love them, but we're not speaking.
Yeah. And I realized that I had discovered the oil fields under Western Texas. I published a book called Friday Night Lights. I know a lot about oil in Texas. That they love us even when they are being awful. They need their autonomy. There's a wonderful book that was written just about the time I was doing Eggshells by a psychologist who describes the 20s. This was 15 years ago. I think it's even more serious now. The 20s as being a period of extended adolescence, because their development is not as fast as ours, or as our parents' development was. And the kids would say to me, when I'm 25, when my mother was 25, she had 3 of us. I don't even have a boyfriend, girlfriend. And they'd say, I'm 28. And when I was 28, my father had a job in the corporation that he's going to retire from. Nobody has a straight path anymore. These young people in their 20s, they know how old we were when we did everything.
Yes.
And they're failing.
Yes, my children say that to me. My son recently said, when you were my age, you were married and you had a business already, and he feels like he's failing. That's very true.
And we have, and this is pre-pandemic, we've got economic problems, we've got developmental problems, and it is clear that nobody has the same job for the rest of their lives anymore.
Right. So it's a different world. Ellen,
It's
you
a
have
different world, and they're feeling bad about it.
Yeah.
And also, so they love us. They are jealous of their autonomy, partly because they think they're failing. If you were a success, then you'd be more open if you felt like a success.
No, but I really see this actually in all my in my kids, particularly my younger ones. And I have a 24, and a 22. And I do think they're really afraid that they're failing. They're scared. It's hard being in your 20s.
Well, they're right.
Yeah. Let's go to a question from Ellen. Let's hear from her.
Yes.
Hi, Jane. I love your book. I'm nearly finished with it. I've been devouring it the last few days. I finally got it in preparation for this meeting. So thank you so much.
Thank
you.
I
love the stories in it in particular. I think it just really brings it to life. Such such real life stories that I think so many of us can relate to. I thought it was really interesting how, and you started talking a little bit about this just now, how you're kind of reframing the 20s. And you talked about it, just now as a period of extended adolescence. And I have twin 24-year-old daughters, so I can attest to that. But I was curious about, and I'd love to hear more about that period of the 20s in terms of how the relationship changes. It seems like there's while they're still in your house and they leave, and then in the 30s, it seems like the relationship, there's maybe potential for improvement. So how would you define the time in the 20s in terms of the relationship between the adult child and the parent? Like, what is the impetus? What is the work to be done during this time?
So remember when they were 2? Or when they were starting to walk, and you went.
Oh, wait,
wait, Jane, I just muted you by mistake. I was muting someone else. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So when they were 2, or the year and a half, or a year, depending on remember when they tried to walk and you had to let them go?
Yeah.
They couldn't learn to walk themselves if you always held their hand.
Yeah.
Remember when at 2, everything was no? That's your 20-year-olds. They're learning to walk in the real world. They have to be independent. They are jealous of their independence, and they're negative to us because they are creating a new life. And they know that life has to be independent of us. And
I love you. This is so helpful for me to hear this. It's so helpful.
And you remember when they were terrible teens, how they tortured us.
Yes.
I only have sons, so they went after their father. I was so grateful I didn't have daughters because I never was good at makeup. And I knew they'd be on me. Teenagers, they're separating. They're doing everything they can, and they treat you like crap. And then eventually they resolve that. I my oldest grandson just graduated from high school. He's going to college, and I can see him smelling the barn. He's going to be out of that house in another month or two, and he's getting nicer again. He was never as bad a teenager as his father, I have to tell you. And at some point, we were in the kitchen, the three of us, and my grandson was being a little snippy to his dad. And I said, Benji, you will never be as terrible a teenager as your father was.
Well, you can also say that with a grandmother's love. So someone told me the other day, Jane, that being a grandmother is the only thing in life that's not overrated.
I'm with you. That's my most recent book is about grandparents, unconditional love. However, Nina, in order to get to those grandchildren, you have to deal with the people at the front door.
Right.
And all of the issues in eggshells come up again. And if you don't obey your grown children, you break all the rules that we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. All they have to do is lock the door.
Right. They can just
and
go.
We all know people whose children have not allowed them to be with the grandchildren. And they don't know what they did wrong. But I interviewed a handful of them. And what they did wrong was they criticized the daughter-in-law's cooking. You don't criticize the daughter-in-law's cooking.
Or cleaning. I have, my son is engaged to a very sweet girl who cannot clean to save her life.
Yes.
And I cannot say anything, of course, because that would be really stupid, but I'm going to have to be careful.
But when they have a child and you go visit, don't clean the house. Because she will take that as criticism. The other big thing that I learned so number one, they love us even when they're being crappy to us. Number two, they hear advice as criticism. It's a megaphone. And if you happen to make a criticism, they're out of the door. Mm-hmm. It's a sensitive spot. I found that the one way that I could give advice, particularly when the grandchildren were born, was to praise the things they did that I loved them doing. Mm-hmm. So is it training a dog? There's a new way of thinking about dog training. You do it with love. Train it's just a question of how you, it's just us. It's a question of how you manipulate them.
Right. Well, that's helpful. Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice. So how do we, right, instead of kind of feeling like we're always like calling and being ignored, or someone mentioned in the chat that they just want to text these days. That's completely universal. They won't call you. They'll only text with you.
Yeah.
How do we turn it around to feel a little bit like we're in control and we're doing what we need to do?
Girlfriends.
Yeah. To have the relationship we want. Talking to our girlfriends.
Yes. And let them be.
Yeah.
They are leaving. They are growing. They are insecure. They think they failed because they haven't succeeded the way they think we have. Here's something else I learned. Your children think that your work or your life has been pretty much a straight line.
Right.
So when my kids were small, I told them about all of the times I got fired, which was a lot. My theory about publishing is you're a great success if you're hired one more time than you've been fired. and I did that so that they could see that I failed a lot. They are, they're trying to, did they all get into the college you wanted them to get into? No, they failed. Did they get A's all the time? No. Did they they're just a pot of self-disappointment for the expectations of our crazy world.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense.
So we have to have sympathy for them, and it's no longer about us. This is the other piece of it. We move. My image of this was, a fried egg.
Yeah.
We were always, the family was in the yoke, right? As they get older and they get out of the house in their 20s, we are on the brown fringes of the white.
Okay.
We're no longer the center of their lives.
Right. That's
we
something
better
else
get
I
used to it.
really, yeah, I really took that from your book. And I have really been forcing myself to kind of sit on my hands more. I've been calling less. It's really helping me. All right, let's take some questions from the audience. Ronnie, please.
Ronnie, hi.
Hi, you're delightful. I feel very estranged from my daughter. She's 46. Also because we have I moved from the United States. I'm in Nova Scotia now, but she is a texter, and I grieve because I don't have FaceTime. She doesn't like to FaceTime, and it's boiled down to special occasions. She'll call me on special occasions on FaceTime, which is very hurtful, but I find it really insulting. And then when she does see me, she sees me aging. See, if you're with somebody on a daily basis or very often, you don't really see their aging process as much as if you don't see them for a great period of time, then you see them and go, oh my God, that person's aged. I know she's very fearful at this age that
How old is she?
she's 46.
Ah, yes. It never ends.
It never ends.
But the thing is, when I was very young, because I had her when I was 24, somebody said to me, don't think, someone in passing that had a profound impact, don't think that parenting stops at 18, because it doesn't.
Yeah,
and of course, I couldn't relate because I was, very young. When I look back at my 20s, I kind of viewed it as just going out of your house on an adventure, an all-night party, and not coming home for a long, long time.
It's good.
And, I really wish we would have more education in understanding what human development is, because it includes, of course, children. That would aid parenting a lot, and explain a lot of the behaviors that they experience, which we experience, but when we are their age. So
well, we don't get quite enough help, particularly with phases like this. I think dealing with teenagers and as they become adults, there's not enough talk about how to deal with it, which is why we're here. We all want to do it better. Let's hear from Stacy Sherman.
Hi there.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi, can you, okay?
I think we can hear you. Take out your headphones. Yes, it's better, I think.
I can't hear her.
Can you talk? Yeah, go ahead, Stacey, talk.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Good.
thank you. So first of all, what a gift to be here with you today. I'm reading your book. I learned about it on Revel, so thank you, Revel. And I wanted to share, I have a 21-year-old and a 23-year-old. I would consider I'm in the sandwich generation now.
Yes.
And I'm learning what that actually means. I never understood it. So thank you, Revel, again. I have learned, as I'm reading your book also, that there is truly effective communication with our up and down generation. But speaking of the advice given to me that I find is working, and I'm curious what other tip you have around effective communication, is saying to your young adult who's not a kid and not an adult, the word is willingness. So in other words, to say, I'm willing to let you live here if you're willing to do these certain responsibilities. And if you're not willing, I'm not willing.
That makes sense.
Very good. Yeah, that makes sense. A kind of meeting in the middle, a kind of saying,
the trouble is that they're going to want to have it their way.
Of course.
Yes, but the willingness I'm finding to be helpful in that, what I'm willing to do, and giving them the choice.
That's great.
Well, I think also using the word willing does go back to boundaries. It's kind of, I think it's very important at this phase in life to really understand what, as you said, what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do, like where you're willing to go, how far, how much money you're willing to give them, how much, what you're not, you're not allowing them to speak a certain way, like everyone kind of staying a little bit more in their own lane. It's kind of like what Jane was saying. We all have to, I think, retreat a little bit from
Yeah, we
parenting.
do.
And so
And
that,
we can't, I think one of the things one of the disciplines,
Mhm.
Stacy, is to try not to take everything they do that we don't, that's different personally.
Yeah,
Take texting, for instance. That's how they do.
right.
I with one of my sons, all we do is text.
Mhm.
When we see each other, but all the rest is texting. And we have we've learned a way of texting with each other that is loving.
Yeah, same with me and my son. That's really all he wants to do. He doesn't want to FaceTime. And I have to just kind of accept that and not keep saying, I want you to call me. Like he doesn't want to call me. So I have to stop
And
asking.
my other son, who's 56, during COVID, he tried to call me most every night. And we had a moment. I want to tell you this story because it's about ego and about crisis. Beginning of COVID, early COVID, his son got really sick. He was with COVID, he was really sick, and then he got pneumonia. He came down with asthma eventually. So it was a very scary, and he get these coughing fits. And if they put him in the shower to shock him out of coughing, otherwise they would have had to call an ambulance, and he would have.
How old was the
He was
child?
10. He was
Oh,
10.
scary. God.
11. It was so scary. And so he'd call me and I'd say, how's Toby? And he'd say, fine, Mom. He didn't want to scare me and he didn't want to deal with my anxiety.
Mhm.
My old publishing friend, Amy Hertz, has a meditation group, started a meditation group. She's a big Buddhist, for her friends. And one day, I was so crazed because David wasn't telling me the truth. One day they talked about keeping yourself calm, watching your mind, and not making that spark. So I thought to myself, I'll try that.
Yeah.
I tried it. I said, how are things going? Tell me about, what do you want to talk about? And he told me the truth. Told me how scared they were and how sick he was.
Yeah.
And I realized by not letting that spark go across, I could be my son's mother again.
Right. So again,
Help
by
him.
by pulling back, really.
By pulling back.
Yeah. By being what he needed you to be. Because I'm sure many of us, I'm sure we're not the only two people here who have been accused of, my kids say my anxiety makes them crazy. Like they don't,
Oh, yes.
like they don't need my anxiety, right? That's not helpful. Let's
One-
hear.
just
Oh, go
sorry, I
ahead.
just want to say one last comment and then I'll be quiet.
Don't be
I
quiet.
wanted to say, Jane, I also applaud you for not getting offended that that people, your kids, the younger generation are texting you or not communicating in a way that maybe you wish was different, because I know many grandparents who will get angry and pull back. And that
Yeah.
doesn't serve a purpose. You're expecting something that's not fair.
Right.
I think you're.
I
also-
applaud you.
Well, thank you. And the other piece of it is, thank you. And the other component is that we are grieving the loss of intimacy. It's worse because of COVID, but they grow up and they want to be with their friends. They might not have been on their phones the way they are now, but they would say, hi, Grandma, and go back to what they were doing when they were 12.
Right.
Where before they would run and give you a hug, the knee hug. You feel you really.
That is it's an excellent point that we are grieving, that it's a period of loss for us. It's a transition from
terrible.
high school to college to their 20s where they're really off on their own. They move to different far-flung places. I sometimes realize that I want to call them and I'm doing it to serve my need. Like it's
That's
not
right.
about, it's to fill something for me and I have to find a hobby or do something else.
Right, yeah, get a life. I had the text. So Benji, my first grandson, uh, comes over across town. We live in Manhattan to have brunch with me on an occasional weekend. And he comes alone. And we go to lunch 3 blocks from here. And by the time I'm in my apartment, my son has texted me, "How is Benji?" Fine. And at some point I said, "He's really ready to leave home." And he wrote, "Yeah." And then I wrote, "You know, it's breaking my heart. I'm really going to miss him."
Mm.
And he wrote back, "Me too."
Yeah.
I wrote back, "Let's help each other. I had to give you and David up at some point."
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's really lovely.
And that's what, so it was all text,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
was full of love.
No, that is really a lovely
Isn't
story.
that a beautiful story?
Yeah, it really is. And how great to come full circle and be able to be that for them. I hope my mother died when I was 19, and
I'm sorry.
I really hope that I can be there for my kids when they're saying goodbye to their children. It's beautiful. Pat, do you have a question?
No, I just wanted to talk for a minute. I have 4 children, so from 30 to 40, I had 4. My last one was born on my 40th birthday. He's 32. And he tends to be like incredibly demanding. Just if I don't spend time talking with him or call him or check
Oh.
on him or something. So it's kind of like I've got like almost the opposite of a lot of people have. And he's, he has a son himself, and he's always saying, "Well, I'm going to spend more time with my son than you do." And I don't know, it's just kind of an odd situation in a way. And honestly, if I could go back and do all those years over, oh my God, I would just have done so many things differently.
Sure.
I feel that I just made life way too easy for the kids. I had a very crazy childhood growing up, and I wanted to make it so easy
Perfect.
for them. And
Yeah.
I made it way too easy. And I made it easy for them growing up. And then I made it easy for them like in their 20s. And now it's like going back and saying, wow, I really messed up. I was just trying to be such a good mom, and I'll take care of this and I'll do that and and it's not good.
I feel like
If I
it's
can say
backfired a
anything to
little bit.
anybody, don't do it. Let them get out there and
Well,
I
that,
wrote I wrote a book about siblings. That was my book after Eggshells, because I wanted to know what made for closeness and distance in adulthood.
Mhm.
And
I'm
called
close
Mom
to all
Still
my
Makes
kids.
Best. And
We've got a good relationship.
when you have a lot of kids, the years just between the first and the youngest, they're different families.
Right.
yes,
And-
very much so.
And that the little one may actually not have gotten as much attention because there were 3 in the way. And
Yeah.
it's not your fault. And the past is the past. See if you can figure out a way not to be to nurture yourself and figure out a way. If you can deal with your own guilt for having been too agreeable a mother, then maybe you can set some boundaries.
I'm working on it. It's not easy.
Good.
I'm working on
Yeah,
it.
no, it's a good story, Pat. And Jane, I think one thing we all do suffer with is this feeling, Pat brought it up, this feeling of regret and guilt, right? Feeling of, I wish I had done things differently, and we can't do it differently. And your point about kind of saying like, I did the best I could, enough already. Like my therapist said to me the other day, like, you're doing penance for things that you need to move on from. Like it doesn't.
Yes. So
Yeah.
a couple of years ago, David is the founder of StoryCorps, this oral history thing, and he won the TED Prize,
Amazing.
$1 million.
Oh my God, he won $1 million. That's so
He won
awesome.
the $1 million to do an app so that you could do StoryCorps on the phone.
Wow.
Instead of being in the booth. And they owned him for the year. And they wanted him to do an StoryCorps interview with his mother for Mother's Day. So we did many StoryCorps conversations, and he said to me, "Mom, do you have any regrets?" And this was, I don't know, 5 years ago, I said, you know, David, I was a philosophy major, and there's something called the counterfactual conditional, which is what would have happened if it hadn't done it this way? I don't know what would have happened if I had done different things. So my regrets are having been cruel to people, having made serious ethical mistakes, but I can't tell you what life would have been like, or your life would have been like. So all I can say is I love you, and you know, that's it.
Yeah.
Now that I thought to myself, that sounds a little self-promoting, but getting rid of your regrets makes you be able to stand up taller.
Yeah. 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 And what does it really do for, I mean, I think I fully agree with what you're saying. And I don't think it makes you sound, I mean, we have to all kind of reckon with the past and move forward, right?
Yes.
And we have to, and I agree with Elaine. I'm totally reading every book by Jane. I'm totally ordering the
Thank you.
sibling book right away. I find this very helpful. Sharon, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I do. I've been there, done that with the shoulda, woulda, coulda, but I try to get over it. And I have so many stories that, you know, I could be on here for an hour. I'm hoping that you'll do this again, because boy, I think I unfortunately I didn't know how to get into this group. And so I finally figured it out. That's why I came in late. But I have 3 children, and one is turning 52 and one is turning 50. And the youngest one is about 40 something, 45, I don't know. But they all have children. And I love being a grandmother. But I'm in a situation right now. One of my children live with me, and she's bipolar and ADHD and a whole bunch of stuff. Fortunately, she has a boyfriend, so she goes to him every once in a while. I wish it was every week, but
Yeah.
okay. So right now, one of my granddaughters, who is one of a twin, they just got back from a year in Israel. And I went over there to be with them for 2.5 weeks. And then I came back with them when they finished their studies. And one of them is very spiritual and very much a lot like me. And we have a lot in common. And she's become more religious since she was in Israel.
Yes.
And she can't seem to identify with her mother, my daughter. She's a very strong-willed person. She knows what she wants in life. She knows how she hopes she can get it. And her mother, my daughter, is also a very strong-willed person. And when I came home from grocery shopping last night, Allie was here at my house. And I was, oh, what a great surprise, you know. And we sat and we talked for about 2 hours. And then we sat down, we played bananagrams and talked while we did that. And I said to her, Allie, you and your mother are like 2 positive poles trying to, you know, get together, you know, like a magnet, a North Pole and a North Pole. And it's very, very difficult. I didn't want to downgrade my daughter. So, you know, I tried to explain to my granddaughter that your mom is just like you. And it's very hard when 2 people are alike. And, you know, Allie tries to take over and speak her mind.
Right.
And by the same token, when we're having a conversation at the table, then Jody, my daughter, says, you know what? I think we ought to change the subject.
Well,
You know?
this is the beauty of being a grandmother, it sounds like, right? I mean, it's kind of like Jane's story about helping her son with the grandson leaving for college. Like, you have this wisdom. I mean, I'm not there yet. I don't have the grandchildren, but it's a gift. I mean,
When
that
you're a
seems like-
grandmother, you become smart.
Yeah.
True.
Right?
It's totally true. I think one of the things to be careful of is, I mean, and you're doing it, is as grandparents, we never take sides
Right.
between the generations. We try to bring them together to help them understand each other.
Mhm.
Because it's just we've got to keep we got to stay out of the real crisis, I think.
Right. Well,
But this
yeah,
is
go ahead.
so good. How old
Well,
is this granddaughter?
my granddaughter is, she just turned 19. The twins just turned 19. And I have a 27-year-old granddaughter that lives in Manhattan. We call it Washington Heights.
Well, that's
And
what
yeah, and then the other granddaughter lives in California. So, and the one that teaches, and she lives in New York, I really brought her up. My husband and I brought her up because her mother has a hard time. She's bipolar, you know, that's one. And so they lived with us. And
you were the
yeah, whenever she wants to call somebody and talk, she calls me.
Nice.
So, you know, a comedian once said, the one thing that grandparents and grandchildren have in common, they're both against the parents.
absolutely. That's a funny old joke. That hurts in the long
I
run.
know.
But also in the unconditional love, when I was doing the research for the grandparent book, I found a whole lot of grandparents who were raising grandchildren, mainly due to drugs.
Oh, that sounds so hard. I mean, as much as being a grandmother sounds
It's
great.
really hard. And it's, if there's a gift a human being can give, it's that. It's helping the grandchild with the love and the nurturing that they're not getting from the parents.
Yeah,
What's the name of your book with grandparenting?
It's called Unconditional Love.
I'll put it in the chat.
Oh,
Put
thank
it in
you.
the chat.
But I think that is so true. You know, my memory, I was very close to my two grandmothers, and they were much more able to be much more loving and present with me than my parents were. And when I think about affection as a child, it was my grandparents. So I think that's
It's
very true.
the miracle grow
Yeah.
for our character.
So
and all that.
let's just quickly recap for everyone, because I first of all, everyone I highly recommend this book. It's not
Thank
long,
you.
and it's like 200 pages, and it's just so good. It'll really help you. I think it's called Walking on Eggshells by Jane Isay. But then the few things to kind of remember that I think are just very helpful, right? So stop giving advice, back off. Your children really do love you. You may not feel it, but they really do.
They're
love
not returning your phone calls, but they love you.
Exactly. They're not returning their phone calls, but they love you. What else? They're
Respect the
struggling.
boundaries.
Respect the boundaries.
Their autonomy is central.
Their autonomy is
And-
central, and they're struggling. Try and have a little compassion for them. As much as we're grieving and we feel mad when they don't return our calls, they're actually going through a lot.
That's right. And not returning our calls is not about us.
Right.
If we can take our ego off the table, even for a few minutes a day, and just let them breathe, they will come home. They will come back.
Yeah.
Because they love us. They have to walk just like a year-old. They have to be able to keep their balance and find their path.
Mhm.
And they know that if they hold our hand, they're not ever going to be independent.
Right.
So,
And what do we do for ourselves? I mean, as you said, we just all need to get a life. I mean, we have lives, but we have to really focus on our own lives, right?
and I really do believe that friendships, I believe that girlfriends are the answer to most problems, as you know. And but I think we have, if we can just say that, you can say to yourself, this really isn't about me.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can have a little empathy for him or her. Then your hurt goes away, because it isn't you, because you recognize that it's not directed at you.
Yep.
That makes it, and then you don't spend that much time. Even if they call you every day, it's 5 minutes. So if you have 4 kids, it's 20 minutes. You have a very long day. And also, I think I've been thinking a lot about men retiring from their work. You know what misery it is, because they've lost their identity.
Yeah.
Many. I think that for us, having grown children no longer in the house, no longer having to cook for them, no longer doing all those things, it may be very much like retirement. It may be a loss.
Yeah.
That if we
it really
save
is.
ourselves, everybody, this is a universal loss. Take a deep breath. It's not about me. Let's figure out what to do.
Yeah. That's a
And
really.
it's not about time, Nina. It's about emotional nurturing.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Is there-
go work for Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, go do things that are important to you. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I have lots of things in my life I love, but you're right. It's a shift of thinking and of orientation, and remembering that it's not personal is so important. And it's also true that the more you kind of pull back and chill out, they do come to you.
They come to you.
It's completely true.
So my
Nina,
last
is there
story-
any, oh,
Go ahead,
I'm
Jane.
sorry. Is
No.
there any way that we can develop this into a support group?
Well, we have one on Revel. If you search for moms of adult children, here, I'll put it in the chat. Actually, there are two. Sorry, there's two. Linda Gregg runs one and I run one. And if you go to groups or communities on Revel, there's a forum called Moms of Adult Children. So you can go there and post, and we'll post the groups there. But yeah, there are two active ongoing support groups right now.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, great. What was the second one?
They're both, I think they're called the same thing. Hold on, I'll find it and I'll email you, Sharon. But if
Oh,
you
great.
look for the
Thank
moms of adult children on Revel, you'll find it.
A
great.
friend of mine recommended this group, and she said that so many people that she knows, excuse me. Thank you.
I
That
think
was
we,
my husband.
oh,
He has dementia, and he's also in a wheelchair, and so I deal with that. Besides the daughter that's here that's bipolar, so I really need. I'm in a support group for people who are caregivers, but I just need as many support groups as I can get.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
I think,
I even have a sign on my door: "Do not disturb."
I think it's something that Revel can actually do really well. It's a safe community where you can find
Yes.
women going through the same stuff. Let's take our last question from Pamela.
I have a question about the line between giving so much space and time up and the fear of cutoff. Or
Secure.
the fear of cutoff of will they come back? Like how much time, if you give, like I'm giving free rein to my son to kind of designate when he wants to come to me. He lives on his own at this point and everything else. So I'm doing my thing now, but I'm still holding on to. Like how much,
You're worried he's not going to come back. How old is he?
22.
Oh, he'll come back.
Yeah.
I have a 22-year-old son also, Pamela, and in the group I run every other Thursday, there are a bunch of us. I mean, it really is very common to feel like they're not in touch and they're not talking to you and they hate you and they'll only text occasionally and they only call when they need money. And these things are so universal. You should join one of these groups because you'll feel better.
Yeah.
He will come back. Like you have to, look, there are estrangements. Obviously, I don't talk to my own father, which makes me worry. I think my kids see I don't talk to my father. They don't have to talk to me. But I think if you're loving and honest and open and you're willing to apologize, a therapist once said to me, apologize for the things you did wrong when you get a chance.
Absolutely.
I think that that's really important. I apologize a fair amount when it occurs to me for the things that I did wrong. Be open, be available, be kind. They'll come back.
So
Go on.
yes. They come back. If you're feeling really crazed and lonely, you can send a loving text, not asking for anything, but just saying, thinking of you, talk to somebody just to let them know that there's love at the other end, because they're worried that you're mad at them.
Yep.
That's one.
That's
About repentance. It is the best human relations tool. I think there are 4 R's. 1 is recognize what you've done. 2 is repent and apologize without no excuses. Repair. Do what you can to make better whatever it is. And 4th, if you're lucky, return.
Yeah.
But you have to stand there and wait for the return to come. And that's all.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think that's so completely right. All right. I wanted to let everyone know this will we're going to release this as our podcast because there's too much good information not to. So this will be our podcast next Friday, a week from Friday. You can just Google Raging Gracefully is the name of our podcast, and you can subscribe, and it'll be next Friday's episode. You can also always go to the blog on Revel, which is called The Reveler. At the top of the page on the website, it says blog, and you can search there for Raging Gracefully, and all of our recordings will come up. I also put in the chat a link to support groups and then a link to the community, Moms of Adult Children. And I do that too. Someone says I do that too. Loving texts go a long way. And I do the same thing, Jane, to my son, particularly, who's my most difficult right now. I'll just send a text with a heart, and he'll usually heart back at some point. And
That's all.
that's it. Exactly. Thank you so much, Jane. We're publishing one of
Thank
Jane's
you.
articles on Sunday this week in our newsletter about being a grandparent, and hopefully we'll do more events with you. I'm going to order the sibling book right now. Lovely
Yeah.
to meet you.
Thank
Thanks
you so
everyone.
much.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.